Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society and the ultimate destination for athletic training professionals, students, and educators looking to learn more about sports medicine and athletic training. In each episode, we'll dive headfirst into conversations with experts in the field, bringing you insights, stories, and cutting-edge information about athletic training and sports medicine. This week on Inside Athletic Training, we welcome in Rob Scheidegger, the Vice President of Health and Performance for the Seattle Mariners. Enjoy the show. All right, Rob, welcome to Inside Athletic Training. Super excited to have you on. You're currently in your third year leading the Health and Performance team with the Seattle Mariners organization. We will get into all the cool details about your job and your career path. But first, to start the show today, I want to let the listeners learn a bit more about you. So if you don't mind, share a bit about your background. Where were you from? Were you an athlete growing up? And also share with the listeners about how you found your passion for athletic training.
Sounds good. First, I just want to say thank you, Sam. I'm really honored to be here. I've really enjoyed this podcast and had the opportunity to hear, from many of the talented people across Major League Baseball, all the great athletic trainers that we have. I'm so proud to be a part of this profession and proud to have a role. And so thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to come on and share my story. I hope people find it interesting, and I hope it inspires some young staff, because the profession of athletic training has done so much for me. And this is one way I'd love to, have the opportunity to give back. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Of course. Absolutely.
In this regard. For me, I'm actually super fortunate in working for the Mariners. I'm from Washington originally. I grew up in a small town in South Central Washington called Yakima. Went to high school there, and then went to school just a little bit up the road at Central Washington University for my undergraduate education. And I was an athlete growing up, but not a very good one. Baseball was my sport. It was really the only sport that I was ever interested in. I never really had a desire to do anything else. If I could go back, I probably would get into golf, because I remember during my time at University of Washington looking sort of enviously at the golf kids that were on scholarship there, on the same scholarship that the football kids did, who were out there like putting their bodies on the line every day. And those other, the golf student athletes were like playing golf on some of the nicest courses in the world. And so I remember thinking like, boy, I should have probably played golf growing up, but I was a baseball player. Absolutely loved playing baseball. It was the only sport I wanted to play. I love all sports. I enjoyed watching other sports, but watching football was all I needed to sort of talk me out of wanting to play football, even though I enjoy that sport as well. But definitely was a baseball player growing up. And honestly, that kind of leads into your third question. Because of baseball, I had the opportunity to really build a passion for athletic training. I remember I was a sophomore in high school playing on the baseball team, and I started to have some sort of forearm elbow pain, just throwing like during our build up to the spring season. And I was just kind of like any kid would do, just kind of working through it. And we had a great coach at the time who asked me when I was you could tell I was sort of struggling a little bit. And he said, have you talked to our athletic trainer? And I was like, actually what he said was, have you talked to the trainer? And I kind of looked up and down myself, because I thought he was talking about like a strength coach or something. I at that time didn't even know like the phrase trainer, and I was like, are you saying I need to get into shape? It's basically like, and he's like, no, the athletic trainer, like, they'll help you if you have an injury. He kind of gave me a little bit of like a rundown, and we had an amazing athletic trainer at my high school. His name was Michael Perala. He is actually a PA now in the Tri-Cities area, which is just about an hour east of Yakima, where I grew up. But he was an incredible athletic trainer, such a, kind and compassionate person, and really smart. And I went and saw him, and in a couple of simple days, he gave me some tips, some sort of mobility stuff and some exercises to, work on my forearm. And, lo and behold, the pain went away. And during the process of spending time in the training room with Mike, I was observing his day to day, and I'm like, wait, let me get this straight. Like, you get paid just to like come watch the sports people and help, watch all these games and be a part of that and like help people, and I knew then like, this is something I want to do. And he had an athletic training class that he ran at my high school. I went to Davis High School there in Yakima, So I was able to take his beginning and advanced athletic training class, and I volunteered in the training room after school. And, it was just such an awesome experience. And I knew that, that was kind of what I wanted to do. So, then went to college, and then, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, no, that's a common theme is injuries in high school, meeting the athletic trainer, figuring out, hey, there actually is an athletic trainer. This is a job that exists. And that's how a lot of you guys across the league have gotten started. So very interesting to hear that the common theme throughout the league. Well, Rob, you've been with the Mariners organization for 3 years now. You have a huge amount of experience in the athletic training world, kind of unique compared to a lot of your colleagues, which is why I'm super excited to have you on the show today. I want to start by talking about your time at the University of Washington. Obviously, you're a Washington guy, just like Kyle Torgerson and a couple guys with the Mariners. But you specifically got your start as the head athletic trainer for the football program at UW in 2005. Can you share with the listeners a bit about your experiences leading up to that job, and then ultimately how you went about landing the job as the head AT for the Washington football team?
Yeah, of course. As you said, I began the head football athletic trainer in 2005, but I actually started at the University of Washington as the baseball athletic trainer and an assistant for the football team. So that was my first role. When I was in Central Washington, I was connected by our head athletic trainer at the time. His name was Gary Smith, awesome mentor of mine, a really good athletic trainer that was at Central Washington for 30 years, long time. And he actually connected me with professional baseball during my time as a student athletic trainer working in the Central Washington athletic training room. So he had some connections with actually the Cincinnati Reds organization, and I had the opportunity to sort of intern and get my start. I actually worked sort of as a strength coach and athletic training sort of aide for a couple of seasons through my time in college, kind of worked my way through their little system and ended up my last stop in minor leagues with the Reds was actually in Chattanooga with the Lookouts in Double-A. And so I intended to work in the baseball setting throughout my course. As I said, at the Open, baseball was 100% my favorite sport growing up, and the sport that I wanted and sort of saw myself working in as I worked through my professional development. And so then once I finished my schooling and had that opportunity to sort of taste professional baseball in the Cincinnati Reds organization, I knew that I wanted to kind of work with baseball players, and the opportunity to go to the University of Washington, work baseball. And then, at that time, there wasn't as many athletic trainers at the collegiate setting as they have now. It's pretty rare for an athletic trainer in this day and age at a major Division I college to work more than one sport, but it was not uncommon, back in the early 2000s when I first started working in that setting. So I was the baseball athletic trainer, and I was an assistant with the football team. I did that for a couple of years, worked with some really great coaches. Ken Knutson, who is a part of the Royals organization right now, is a pitching coach for them in the minor leagues. And has done things with the Indians and a bunch of different professional teams over the years, was our head coach at that time and a great mentor of mine. We had some really good players over the years. Tim Lincecum was a player of mine at the University of Washington during the time when I was the athletic trainer there. Brent Littlebridge, who was, a pretty good player for the White Sox. We had some good players and some good teams during that time. But the head athletic trainer for our football program left in 2005, and I had the opportunity to step into that role. And that was the reason I sort of stepped away from baseball at that time. It was an opportunity to, be in a really challenging role and put myself in a really challenging position really early in my career, and felt like the right thing to do at that time. And so that's, there was absolutely, to sort of simply answer your question, no, I didn't think I would be working in college sports or, specifically in football. It wasn't really my plan. But sometimes you take the opportunities that are presented to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a great opportunity. Like you said, such a big program, major university, Power 5 conference now, they would call it. And football is obviously, one of the most glamorous sports at the college setting. So when you kind of walked into the athletic training room in the football setting, in 2005, Was it a big learning curve for you in terms of different types of injuries, the anatomy? Obviously, you were well skilled in that to begin with. But what was your experience like? The first couple days, months, years on the job, moving from baseball to football.
Yeah, I think at that time it was probably easier for me than when I made my most recent transition from football back to baseball, because I was just going through my schooling, and you're so fresh on everything at that time and less specialized. I think that's one great thing about hiring young staff is often we kind of get into the setting that we're in and we focus on a particular set of injuries or injury prevention techniques or manual therapy techniques specific to the injuries or the preventative measures that you are trying to implement for a particular sport. And when I was young and put into that role, I had just kind of been through and had a sort of a foundational knowledge on everything. And so it wasn't hard for me to sort of transition from the, subacute sort of chronic approach, dealing with the schedule and the frequency of games, to, in baseball, to the sort of traumatic nature of the injuries that you typically see in football, the more routine schedule, with games once a week, and this sort of like routine where you have time to, deal with an injury and the acute inflammation involved in sort of traumatic injuries that occur in a collision or contact sport. It was easy for me to make that transition at that time, because I was so young. And that being said, I learned so much. Like, I was certainly, I don't know that I was, probably as qualified to do a job like that. Like, looking back, knowing what I know now and thinking about all the things I learned over the 15 years that I did that, you almost feel bad for like the players that I had my first few years. So like, man, I learned so much, I probably would have approached some of the things that, we did when we were early on there differently, but, that's life. That's how it kind of goes.
Yeah. And looking back and reflecting on those 15 years as the head athletic trainer for the football team, what did you find that you ended up liking a lot about, working football, that college atmosphere? When you mentioned ultimately you wanted to maybe remain or get back into baseball, but was there something that kind of really drew you into football and ultimately led you to staying there for 15 years?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, with any job, it's always the people for me. That's always been where the value is.
Sure.
And when I reflect, on the things I enjoyed the most about that atmosphere, like there's so many incredible people at the University of Washington. I had the opportunity to interact with student athletes and staff and coaches who, have been lifelong friends and connections that I really value. And so I think ultimately that's what's special about Washington in particular. And I still am in touch with many wonderful people that work or I was connected to in that program. And so I think ultimately, like, that was what kept me there. That was what I enjoyed the most, the people that I was able to interact with, my staff, the athletic trainers that I worked with and worked for, the coaches, the players. I think that's really what it is. But man, it is a fun setting. Division I college football, especially at a place like University of Washington, which is it's a football school. You kind of look around the country and there's schools that are known for basketball. There's schools that are known for football. There's schools that are known for baseball. There's schools that have great women's softball teams. I think there's things that you can identify. There's schools that you can identify being a particular sport. And at UW, man, it's all about football. And we have some really cool atmospheres there. Obviously, a 75,000 seat football stadium, a great fan base that packs that stadium out. Yeah. There's really nothing like it. Football, I think there's a couple of things that made it great for me during the time when I was doing it. I think I had a young family. I had my wife, I was married, and we had a daughter, and I was able to sort of like build a schedule where I could be a little bit more involved in my daughter's life. And I think it's a big challenge for folks who work in professional baseball. Balancing sort of the family and work life, I think is hard. And it was easier for me in that role just because of the consistency of, travel. When we go on a road trip, when we went on a road trip when I was at the University of Washington, it was a one-night trip. We'd fly on Friday to the city we were going to play on Saturday. We'd play the game and we'd immediately fly on our charter plane back. So you miss one, you're gone for one day. And as having done this podcast across Major League Baseball, that's absolutely not the norm for what our athletic trainers are experiencing, and the challenge that the families have to deal with, here. I think that's another thing that really, I enjoyed about the college setting was the ability to have some consistency that probably, at that time would have been hard for me to manage, with a young family. And now my daughter's grown. She actually just graduated from the University of Washington last year. So, the schedule is not such a big deal to me. I have the time to be able to invest in traveling and roving to our different affiliates and doing all the things that I do now. So that would have been a challenge with a young family.
And looking back at that time, one thing you mentioned earlier is the amount of athletic trainers who basically exist on staffs. In 2005, there might have been one or two people, I'm not sure what you guys had, at Washington for football. But share a bit with the listeners, those people who are students and kind of may not understand the old days, if you want to call it, of the athletic training staff. So what did the staff look like on the football team at Washington, and kind of compare that to what you guys have now in Seattle?
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, when I worked baseball at Washington, I was the assistant for the football team. So the head athletic trainer at that time didn't even have a full-time assistant, because I was obviously busy with baseball during the spring season and for part of the fall. And it was just the two of us full time. And then when I became the head athletic trainer, I had one full-time assistant, and, we would have interns and people that would help out, but it was really just, myself and a longtime colleague of mine whose name is Darren Nystrom. He's the head athletic trainer for the football team now, and was just an incredible, worker and a close friend. And the two of us covered football at Washington, just the two athletic trainers, for many years. And it really wasn't up until the past couple of years that we were able to sort of expand. Now that he has a great team of athletic trainers and physical therapists and, transitioning into kind of the approach that we've taken with the Mariners, for example, just with our 26, man roster up here in Seattle, we have 4 athletic trainers. Our 3 sort of full-time athletic training roles are filled by Kyle Torgerson, Kevin Orlowski, who's also a dual credential PT, ATC, Taylor Bennett. And then we have a full-time sort of manual therapist who also happens to be an athletic trainer, plus myself, so really there's like 5 of us for that 26-man group. And for many years, I covered the University of Washington football team, which has over 100 player roster, myself and Darren Nystrom, just the two of us, taping ankles and doing the injury prevention and evaluation and rehabilitation and all those things. So that's not even to sort of mention the fact that there's so much better collaborative and multidisciplinary approach to injury prevention and health and performance that didn't exist during that time either. We also have, a major league and minor league full-time dietitians. We have a sports science team that helps to integrate and really keep our scientific approach and our data-driven approach to, healthcare and performance intact. We have obviously a whole crew of people that, we didn't have those resources or access to those things, even as sort of close back as 2005. So I know it's, 20 years, but a lot's happened in the past 20 years. And I think for the better in the way that we can care for our athletes and provide them with the resources they need to stay healthy and perform at their very best.
Yeah, definitely interesting to hear you say, back in the day, there was a head athletic trainer for a major college football team and didn't even have a full-time assistant. I think that's something that, a lot of our younger listeners out there might be shocked to hear, but it's cool to hear from someone who's on the inside there. Well, Rob, reflecting back on your time at the University of Washington, obviously this year, Huskies had an incredible year, played for the national championship, amazing things happening there. Is there anything as you look back that you miss about the college setting, being around younger athletes who stick around for 4 years in some cases, or rivalries? What do you miss most about kind of that environment that you worked in for so long?
Yeah, boy, I mean, to your last point, sticking around for 4 years seems like I kind of got out right at the very beginning of the name, image, likeness era. So I'm not. Who knows what it's like now? I can't really speak to. It almost feels like, at least in the world of sort of high level college football, that it almost seems more like a professional setting than a college setting. But fortunately, during the time when I was there, I mean, there's so much excitement around college athletics, and that's infectious. The athletes that are there, obviously with a few exceptions, they're playing because they love the sport and they're trying to build opportunity. So the interactions that you have with those athletes are so different. They trust you. There's less work to build those types of, trusts, and you're interacting with student athletes at a really pivotal time in their life. People obviously between the ages of sort of 18 and 22, that's when you're really like coming into your own and meeting people who will shape the future for you. And you build really special bonds with folks that are that age in the role that athletic trainers play. And that can be really like lifelong connections that are really rewarding. But honestly, like the things I do miss the pageantry of sort of game day college football. I had the opportunity to go watch the Huskies play in the national championship this past year against Michigan. And, there's really nothing like that. I love professional baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. There's so many neat experiences, but there's something about a football game day and the excitement, because there's less of them, there's less games. And so when you play, it's a bigger deal, playoff baseball game is the most similar experience to just a regular season college football game. Playoff baseball feels like just how it feels every Saturday, because really the way that college football is set up, it is a playoff game. Like every game is a playoff game, and with the frequency of games that they have and the importance of each individual game. And baseball is kind of a game where the best teams compete day in and day out. And so there's a routine to it. And our spectators are a little more social. They're not going to stand up on their feet and, scream for 9 innings of a Tuesday night game that we're playing against the Athletics. It's unlikely that that's going to be the case. And so you kind of get into those routines, but I think that makes it even more fun when you are a part of a playoff game or a game, that has those playoff type implications. Then it feels so different. And that's what's special about baseball. And you just can't really get that, to me, sort of in the college setting, because there's just urgency every single game. So definitely the rivalries, Washington State football games, unbelievable, such a fun thing to be a part of. Obviously, I had the fortune of going to a bunch of different bowl games there. We played in the Rose Bowl. We played in a semifinal game against Alabama in the Peach Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, a ton of rivalry games against Oregon and Washington State. So kind of really special memories, really special setting. And I would highly recommend it, for people, because you get to be a part of those teams and get to be a part, and you really feel like you're a part of the action during that time. So it's really fun.
And you're in a great spot. You were with Washington, and especially in Seattle with the Seahawks and the Mariners. There's really no better fans. I would say no louder fans for sure than the people in Seattle. They just love their sports team so much. And as I mentioned in the open, you've now been with the Mariners since 2021, leading the health and performance team there, working with some awesome people, like you mentioned, Kyle Torgerson, and the staff over there. Talk about that process of moving over to pro baseball from the college setting. Was it an opportunity that you just couldn't pass up to get back into baseball? Obviously, you're a local guy, born and raised. Was this something you always kind of thought you'd be back into?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a little bit of both, though. If you say, is this an opportunity you couldn't pass up, or is it something I always aspired to do? Like, I think it's both of those things.
Sure.
I think, my sort of memories of professional or high level sports are all sort of centered around the Seattle Mariners. I think it's really special to have the opportunity to work for and have such a critical role with your hometown team, and my sort of formative sports memories all revolve around the Mariners. I wasn't really a huge fan of other sports, but I was a huge fan of sitting up in the 300 level of the Kingdom and watching Alvin Davis and watching Harold Reynolds and, all of the great players, Jeffrey Leonard and Mark Langston, and then into the sort of like King Griffey Jr. and Jay Buhner and, Randy Johnson, and then into the sort of Ichiro and, all those special teams that they formed my desire to be a part of sports. So when the opportunity to, come to the Mariners, it was something that I have aspired to do. Certainly, it was also an opportunity I just couldn't pass up. It's a really special organization with a bunch of really special people, but it was also a fun challenge. I think that something for the young sort of listeners out there, or people as they kind of progress through their career as athletic trainers, sometimes in order to really like make strides and grow, you have to sort of be potted in different soil. You have to put yourself in challenging situations. It's hard to get out of your comfort zone, especially working, in the collegiate setting with a football team for over 15 years. There was tons of challenges. I'm not saying I had it all figured out, but I was pretty comfortable. I was comfortable with the day-to-day. I was comfortable solving the problems that are most frequently arise in that role. I kind of knew how to do it, and I was really good at it. And when I went to the Mariners, I was faced with challenges that were vastly different than what I had been experiencing in my previous setting. And that has caused me to grow in ways I never would have grown if I had not taken the opportunity. So for me, it was also a desire to continue to improve myself. And that's a pillar of our health and performance department with the Mariners, is being in a state of constant improvement and always finding ways to help grow yourself and the people around you. So it was just as much about a professional challenge in order to help me continue to grow and not get stagnant as a professional, as it was a dream of mine to always, be part of my hometown's favorite team.
Mm-hmm. And you've been leading the staff since 2021. Hugely important role, like you said, for your hometown team. Must be just an amazing feeling to have an impact there. It's a unique title. You're not the head athletic trainer. You work with Kyle and the staff there. Can you share some more details about the duties and responsibilities of someone in your position, and talk about a little bit about what your day-to-day looks during the season?
So I think really my role is directing all aspects of health and performance across our entire organization. When I was hired to come in and start in this role, I actually started off and I was the manager of athletic training. And I think that was really a desire to provide administrative support and mentorship for what was at that time a really young major league staff.
Sure.
We were going through sort of a transition. We had a longtime head athletic trainer, Rick Griffin, who is a friend and I think one of the really special people in our setting within not only professional baseball, but athletic training as a profession as a whole. And we had transitioned to this young staff, and, it was time for Rick to get to go fish in Montana and do the things that, he had always sort of been putting off. And I think our president of baseball operations, Jerry DePoto, he's a really outside the box thinker. And I really credit him for looking at the situation that he had, a young staff. Kyle, I owe Kyle a lot because he's been such a great partner and such a great guy to work with. Really in a lot of ways showing me the ropes, and getting me back integrated into professional baseball. But really, my first year, that role was really to provide mentorship and support for that team. And I think laid the foundation for what was to come, which is kind of takes me into what my current role is in integrating all of the departments that make up health and performance support for the Seattle Mariners organization. And in the past, or in the old model, teams would have athletic training departments. They would have, strength and conditioning, which is relatively new in the world of baseball, compared to maybe some other sports. And then sort of like all these other support services that are important for health and performance, like nutrition and sports science and, mental health. And those things all existed. But as we know, those departments work better when they work together. It's like the sum of the parts, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We can do way more when we work together. And so many of the positive outcomes happen when we collaborate across those lines. And so I think in order to do that, we kind of laid that foundation that first year in sort of starting to introduce some of the ideas of how we can integrate the strength and conditioning into our injury prevention programs, and vice versa, how the athletic trainers can provide insight and some of the things that we do in the training room can actually help the strength coaches with the day-to-day responsibilities that they have in helping our players perform at their best. And so then it kind of has transitioned into really directing all the aspects of our health and performance. So we really have created a singular department that breaks down those traditional silos and I think really improves outcomes in regard to sort of health and performance for our players through a really collaborative approach. The departments that make up our health and performance team are the athletic trainers, the strength and conditioning department, our rehab and return to play, which is our physical therapy group, our sports science team, which is made up of 2 biomechanists, a PhD sports scientist, and some analysts, our dietitians, and then a huge thing that we've built out over the past 3 years is a structured and robust mental health program.
Yeah, that's such great insight from you there, just for the listeners out there who are looking to kind of figure out what they want to do in this profession. Like you said, athletic trainers, strength and conditioning, rehab, sports science, dietitians, mental health. There is so much that goes on inside the performance aspect of all sports, but specifically Major League Baseball. So really, really cool for you to share that information with people who are trying to figure out, what a role might look like for them in athletic training. There's a lot more that goes into it than I think people imagine. Well, Rob, reflecting on the past 2 years or, 3 years now of working with the Mariners and managing the performance team over there, is there a specific aspect of health and performance and your day-to-day work that you really enjoy most?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things. It's really fun to build something and have a group of people, our leaders within the health and performance team, our head athletic trainer, as we talked about, Kyle Torgerson, our head strength and conditioning coach, our director of sports science, our rehab and return to play director. It's been so fun to build this collaborative, multidisciplinary team and see that come to life, to have a vision for something and then to build out the processes and then to see that come to life in a really impactful way that is going to make a difference, or that is making a difference for our players and the experience that they have and for the competitiveness of our teams. It's extremely rewarding and enjoyable. I think perhaps one of the most impactful programs, sort of, into your question, is probably the mental health. When I first started building this out, we really just utilized Sand Creek only for mental health services. We didn't really have any in-house providers, and that was an area we felt like we could make a significant impact on the experience for our players and staff. We've hired a mental health coordinator whose whole job is just providing education and building out provider network for mental health resources, really educating players and staff about mental health and how it is absolutely just as important as your physical health. Not only providing education so people realize that, but then, giving people the tools that they need when they do identify themselves, that in themselves or in a colleague or in a player or in a friend, what to do and how to access those resources. And then to see those things built out and come to life and see them having an impact and hear feedback from players and staff about how positive that's been on their experience in professional baseball is extremely rewarding.
And before we move on from your current role with the Mariners and get into some other topics here, I do have to ask about the hometown connection. So I know you're a Washington guy. Your head athletic trainer, Kyle Torgerson, another Washington guy who we had on the show recently. You guys obviously have so many amazing memories that you just talked about, of being at Mariners games, playing in huge games while you were growing up, the Ken Griffey Jr. era, so much cool stuff going on in that city. What does it feel like now as you reflect on that to actually be in the building and have an impact, a true impact on like your hometown team? Share a bit about how you feel about that.
Yeah, I can't overestimate or I can't over-explain how impactful that is. Like it is so surreal to have the honor of walking down the tunnel and up the dugout stairs, into T-Mobile Park. The people that I've had the opportunity to meet during my time working with the Mariners, it's been absolutely like surreal to have the opportunity to do that. Like you said, was in the stands for so many special moments and was such a huge fan. Even working at the University of Washington, Darren, as I mentioned, my former assistant athletic trainer there, who's now the head athletic trainer. I mean, all summer we would, work our football workouts in the morning. And then if the Mariners were playing, we'd come buy cheap tickets and we'd watch the game, in the outfield. We were here all the time. And so, yeah, it was so surreal to then flip that and find myself standing on the field at spring training instead of sitting up in the stands watching the team get ready and thinking about, the excitement of the year. So, I think the people in the Mariners organization, there's so many really special people here, from our chairman, and sort of managing partner, John Stanton, who is such a supportive owner, cares about the player experience, is really invested in creating a great health and performance. Our president of baseball operations, Jerry DePoto, who really believes in this, and what we do, and Justin Hollander, who's our general manager, he's the most supportive in that, getting out of the idea that the athletic trainers are a support staff. They're just part of the staff. They're just as important as any other staff member, from the manager to the position coaches to anything else that we're doing. The athletic trainer it's not a support role to him. It's just a staff role, and it's just as important as anything we do. So, but they say you should never meet your heroes, but all of the players that I've had the opportunity to meet, the former players that are still involved here, to a man, are incredible people. Alvin Davis has to be one of the most special people I've ever met in my life. He's so supportive, and he really pours his heart and soul into the development of the young players in our system. Mike Cameron is the same way. I could keep going. Dan Wilson, all these guys who we have the pleasure of continuing to mentor our young players. They're people you do want to meet. They're heroes you do want to meet because they live up to what you think they would be. And I think that's just a reflection of the culture that's been created within this organization over the time, that they've been in our community.
Yeah, it has to just be an amazing experience and feeling for you to, like we said, have an impact on your childhood team. Just must be incredible. With shifting gears a bit, I know we have a lot of listeners out there who are athletic training students, and we always try to provide a bit of advice and insight for them with our guests. So when you and your staff are looking, for an intern or to make a new hire or filling a position, can you explain a bit about what is most important for you in a candidate, whether that's experience, education, maybe persistence, or any character traits that you think are kind of most valuable within the Mariners staff?
Yeah, it's a really important question. Connections are so important. I think my advice to students and people who are in their education programs, really being willing to put yourself out there and volunteer and get involved as soon as possible, is so important, because this is such a competitive field. There are so many people who are qualified and are really good at what they do. And often what separates you as a candidate, for an open position are the experiences that you put yourself in, the connections that you've made, and the ability to sort of have someone who the person who's hiring can trust to vouch for you, is really, really important. And so I can't sort of emphasize enough the importance of being willing to get involved and get integrated and put yourself in positions where you can show your willingness to do whatever it takes, to sort of develop yourself as a professional early on. I think that's really important. Then once you have those opportunities, whether that's obviously interning or shadowing or, obviously PBATS has some really cool opportunities that they create for young professionals to kind of get involved and intern and be exposed to baseball. Once you're there, you gotta put yourself out there and be willing to ask questions and sort of admit you don't know things and know where you are on that scale and not be afraid to ask questions and sort of get your hands dirty a little bit and really not be afraid to. A lot of times we'll have a person who will come and shadow or do an internship with us, and they kind of just hang back, and they observe. And the ones who have the best experiences are the ones who aren't afraid to ask questions. They're not afraid to kind of come up and be brave. I know how hard that can be and how uncomfortable that can be, but putting yourself out there and introducing yourself and asking questions and being respectful, but driving the experience for yourself rather than sort of sitting back and hoping that the athletic trainers in that setting are going to do it for you is really, really important. And then once you are out there, once you've kind of gone through those experiences and you get your first opportunity, make the most of it, and make yourself an all-star in the first role that you are. There's no unimportant roles within our system, so what people would consider the entry-level opportunities with the Mariners, when people go and they treat those opportunities as if it's their major leagues, it's their dream, like it was my dream to work with the Mariners. It's their dream to work, in Modesto with the Nuts, and they treat it that way. Those tend to be the staff members who move up the quickest, who have, the best opportunities, who really take advantage of what they have. And so I think just approaching your job that way and being an all-star in the role that you have, it might not be the role that you want when you first are starting out, treat it that way. And I think people would be surprised, how impactful that is on getting where you want to go ultimately in your career.
Yeah, really great advice there, and kind of aligns itself with what we hear from a lot of head athletic trainers and people in your position across the league is, number one, being persistent and taking advantage of your opportunities, but also staying present in the role you're in. I know so many men and women aspire to be a big league athletic trainer or be leading a performance staff like you are, but ultimately being where you are and being present and committing to that affiliate or that job is going to, show you what you're made of and show the front office and the higher ups really that you're committed. So I think that's great advice from you there for the students out there. Well, Rob, I know you're surrounded every day by awesome athletic trainers, Kyle, Kevin, Taylor, just to name a few. But I do want to give you a couple minutes here to recognize other staff members who kind of make up your organizational health and performance staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've mentioned him a ton already, but I can't thank Kyle enough. He's really been the most sort of impactful person in helping me as I've sort of navigated professional baseball after being, out of it for many years. He's been such a great colleague and taught me so much. And I really am thankful for him and everything he's done for me since I've been here. We have a great Major League athletic training staff that deserve credit. Taylor Bennett and Kevin Orlowski are really rising stars in this profession, folks that I can see, guys that I can see, in the very near future running their own training rooms. Both are super capable of sort of going that direction. Our minor league coordinators, from an athletic training perspective, we have a new minor league athletic training coordinator. His name's Dan Reel. He was in AAA with the Diamondbacks last year, so obviously enjoyed a fun run with that crew, and has stepped in and just been a super impactful and positive influence on our young staff. And I'm super excited to see him continue to grow and build our program in a positive direction. And we have an assistant athletic training coordinator who I believe you've hosted on this podcast. Her name's Amanda Lee. She's our Arkansas athletic trainer, and an incredible young talent in this field, and someone who sort of, I think, is on a very skyward trajectory as well. Who's been a really great influence for me as well, and someone who really inspires me in the way that she approaches her day-to-day work. I think the key to a really successful athletic training and health and performance team is the physicians. If you have a physician who's supportive and who gets it, and who has feel for the athletic trainers and how to integrate into a health and performance team, you're way ahead of a lot of places. And we have one of the best there is. Dr. Henry Pelto is our head team physician. He also is a medical director for the Seattle Kraken, the hockey team here in town. And he's a super busy guy, but man, when he's spending time with our players, it's like he has nothing else in the world, and he makes them feel that way. And it just helps us do our job to have someone who's so bought in. And our head orthopedist is new this year, Dr. Albert G. Incredible, person, as good of a surgeon as he is person. And obviously those guys really are at the core of kind of what we do. And then our other leaders in health and performance, we have a new strength and conditioning coach last season. This season will be his second. His name's Matt Rutledge. He came to us from the Yankees. He was with the Oakland Athletics before that. And I don't know if there's a more collaborative, more intelligent, more forward-thinking strength and conditioning coach who is better suited to really like integrate this concept of a unified health and performance department or high performance department. He's been incredible to work with, and deserves a lot of credit for bringing us forward and really developing a really special strength and conditioning department that's well integrated. Our director of sports science, Kate Weiss, obviously really special to build something from scratch that never existed before. I think those are the people that stand out the most. I could keep going, but those are the folks that I think, and then obviously Jerry, DePoto gave me this opportunity, and really thankful for him believing in me and giving me the opportunity to do this.
Yeah. From the days of Rick Griffin to now you leading the charge, and Kyle and everybody over there in Seattle, very innovative group. Always fun to hear what you guys have going on. And always, incredible respect for everybody on staff there. Well, Rob, to wrap up today's episode, we're going to finish with a quick Q&A segment that we call Extra Bases. So I'll ask you 4 quick questions and let you share some insight about some of your favorite things about athletic training. And I'm super excited to hear from you because, you have so much experience outside of baseball. So maybe some more unique answers from you here from our other guests. But we'll kick it off at first base. Either football or baseball, do you have a favorite athletic training room that you've worked in over your career?
Yeah. So great question. I think college football has put me in a lot of crazy training rooms. And I think even professional baseball, one of the things that was so surprising coming to professional baseball is how some of the, visiting training rooms, what they're like, it's something that's just surprising. I think, I'm biased. Obviously, I really like our training room at T-Mobile Park. I think it's a special place. Like it's home, so I think favorite place to work, obviously like it's great to be home.
Sure.
But I think that there are some other really cool things too, some other cool places that I've had the opportunity to be. I remember we played Hawaii in football a couple of years ago, and we had our training room actually like outside on a deck on the beach. That was probably the best training room. That was probably the best training room I ever worked in. It was a full setup, but it was outside on this covered sort of like deck overlooking the water. Hard to beat that.
Yeah, sounds pretty unbeatable to me. Can't argue with you there. Moving on to second base, you've probably seen so many amazing sporting events in your time with Washington and now with the Mariners. Do you have a favorite stadium to watch a game in?
Yeah, obviously I want to just recognize Husky Stadium and T-Mobile Park. I think those are in the top of the stadiums, but I think that would be kind of a boring answer. So I would just say like immediately to you that the first opportunity I had to, be at Fenway Park was unbelievable and gave me goosebumps. And thinking about it right now, just like it's so cool that the history and, being a baseball fan, really special place. And then the Rose Bowl is probably from a, college sports perspective, when it's all decked out for the Rose Bowl and they have the college game day set in the corner with all the roses and the field is perfect. And half the stadium at the time we played was Ohio State versus Washington. Half was purple, half was red.
Yeah.
There's the smells and the time of day and just everything about that game. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I honestly don't think, especially myself, I don't think anyone would argue with you when they get a look at Husky Stadium, on night game, overlooking the water on campus, just absolutely beautiful there. Can't beat it, especially on, in person. I imagine it's incredible. Moving on to third base, again, with your experience in huge college athletics and also professional baseball, you've been to a ton of cool cities. Is there a favorite place when you're on the road to visit?
Yeah, I love New York. I think I'm kind of a city guy, which is funny because I sort of live in a really Pacific Northwest. We have a place that's about an hour outside of Seattle that we live at that's kind of up in the mountains. And so I kind of get my fill of sort of the outdoors and, it's a really special place and I love living here and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I love visiting New York. I love the restaurants and I love the excitement and the feel and the energy of that city. The game day atmosphere is there and, people care so much, about the sports teams. And obviously I'm talking specifically sort of, Mets, Yankees. I would say, I absolutely look forward to that always, the opportunity to be in New York and work games and be in that city for a few days. Always a special thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can't really beat the energy of New York City. I don't think anything really compares. So definitely agree with you there. Last question for today, moving on to home plate. You've been in the big leagues for a couple years now after, like we said a number of times, awesome career at the college level. When you moved over to the Mariners, was there any point in time when you had kind of a welcome to the big leagues moment?
Yeah, I think, the very first game after I was hired to work with the Seattle Mariners, I remember I actually was hired in April, so I didn't do spring training. It was kind of in that weird transitional time in 2021 where things were still a little bit weird for the thing that will not be named, that pandemic that caused all that disruption. And I think I still will absolutely remember it like it was yesterday. We were playing the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I kind of did our pregame stuff and the work that I do, leading up to the game. And I walked out of up the steps of our dugout onto the field, and the Dodgers were taking their batting practice. And, to have the Mariners logo on my chest and to watch the Los Angeles Dodgers, warming up for a game that I had a role, a part to play in. Mm-hmm. It was immediately something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. And it was such a welcome to the big leagues moment, like for me personally, and something really special that I hope everybody gets the opportunity to have that feeling and experience something like that in their career.
Yeah, that's such an awesome story. And again, I keep thinking back, to you talking about being a kid and going to Mariners games, and now, like we've said a couple of times, actually having an impact on the game. Just such an awesome story and so cool for you. So we really appreciate you sharing that. Well, Rob, thanks again for joining the show. Always appreciate your time, your dedication and passion for the profession of athletic training. And we wish you, Kyle, and the guys up in Seattle nothing but the best of luck this upcoming season.
Thanks, Sam, so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside Athletic Training. We hope you've gained valuable insights, inspiration, and knowledge to fuel your athletic training journey. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite platform. And also, stay connected with us on pbats.com for more news about athletic training and sports medicine.